In August 1945, humanity witnessed a kind of destruction the world had never seen before. In just seconds, an entire city vanished. World War II in the Pacific had become a brutal stalemate. Japan refused to surrender, and the United States made one of the most consequential decisions in human history. At 8:15 a.m. on August 6, little boy detonated over Hiroshima. A blast equal to 15,000 tons of TNT erupted in the sky. 70 to 80,000 people died instantly. Buildings vaporized. Firestorms swept the city, and radiation burned survivors who would suffer for decades. 3 days later, the second bomb, Fat Man, fell on Nagasaki. More powerful than the first, it killed 40,000 people on impact and left the city in ruins. By the end of 1945, over 200,000 people had died from the two bombings. Families disappeared, landscapes were transformed, and survivors lived with lifelong scars, both physical and emotional. Japan surrendered on August 15, ending World War I, but the world was left with a terrifying realization. Humanity now possessed the power to destroy itself. These two explosions sparked debates about morality, military necessity, and global security that still continue today. And more than 75 years later, Hiroshima and Nagasaki remain haunting reminders of what happens when war crosses the final line. On the night of December to end, 1984, the city of Bhopal, India, went to sleep as usual, not knowing that within hours, thousands would be dead. At the Union Carbide pesticide plant, water accidentally entered a tank containing methyl isocyanate, a highly toxic chemical. Inside the tank, pressure began to rise. Alarms sounded, but workers were told to ignore them. Just after midnight, the tank burst. A massive cloud of poisonous gas rolled over the sleeping city. People woke up coughing, choking, their eyes burning, unable to breathe. Many collapsed in the streets as they tried to escape. Within the first few hours, more than 3,000 people were dead. Animals fell where they stood. Entire families never made it out of their homes. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Doctors helpless as victims flooded in with burning lungs and failing organs. Over the next few days, the death toll kept rising. Up to 15,000 people would die from the leak and its aftermath. 500,000 were exposed. Many survivors suffered long-term effects: respiratory damage, blindness, birth defects, and chronic illnesses that lasted generations. Investigations revealed shocking negligence, broken safety systems, cost-cutting, poor maintenance, and ignored warnings. The company executives faced global criticism, but accountability remained limited. The Bhopal gas tragedy forced countries worldwide to rethink industrial safety and hazardous chemical storage. But for the people of Bhopal, the scars never healed. Even today, nearly 4 decades later, the disaster stands as a haunting symbol of what happens when corporate responsibility fails, and when human lives are treated as expendable. On March 11, 2011, a massive 9.0 earthquake struck off the coast of Japan. Minutes later, a towering tsunami slammed into the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant and triggered a nuclear crisis no one was prepared for. The reactors shut down automatically after the quake, but the tsunami flooded backup generators, cutting all power to the cooling systems. Without cooling, reactor temperatures began rising rapidly. Within hours, fuel rods overheated. Hydrogen built up inside the reactor buildings. Then a series of explosions tore through the plant, sending radioactive material into the air. More than 150,000 people were forced to evacuate. Entire towns were abandoned overnight. Families fled with only what they could carry, unsure if they would ever return. Radioactive contamination spread across land and sea. Farmland was poisoned. Fishing zones were closed, and cleanup workers faced dangerous conditions for years. Investigations later revealed critical failures, underestimated tsunami risks, inadequate flood defenses, and delayed emergency responses. Japan shut down all of its nuclear reactors in the aftermath. Global nuclear safety standards were re-examined, and public trust in nuclear energy was shaken worldwide. More than a decade later, Fukushima remains a warning that even advanced technology can fail when nature overwhelms human preparation. On April 26, 1986, at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Soviet Ukraine, a late-night safety test went catastrophically wrong and released more radiation than Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. At 1:23 a.m., operators attempted a risky procedure to test the reactor's emergency systems, but design flaws, poor communication, and critical human errors collided in just seconds. The reactor's power surged uncontrollably, temperatures skyrocketed, then an explosion tore the reactor apart, blowing a 1,000-ton steel lid into the air. A column of radioactive fire shot into the night sky. Plant workers were hit with lethal radiation instantly. Firefighters rushed in with no protective gear, unaware they were walking into one of the most toxic environments ever created. Many would die within weeks from acute radiation poisoning. The nearby city of Pripyat, home to 50,000 people, had no idea what had happened. Children played outside the next morning as radioactive dust fell around them like glitter. Evacuation didn't begin until 36 hours later. Over the following days, the Soviet Union struggled to contain the disaster. Helicopters dropped sand and boron into the burning reactor. Miners dug tunnels beneath the plant. Thousands of workers later, called liquidators, risked their lives to prevent an even bigger catastrophe. The radioactive cloud spread across Europe, triggering international panic. Long-term estimates say 4,000 to 30,000 deaths may be linked to the disaster, though the true number will never be known. Chernobyl changed everything: nuclear safety standards, global energy policy, and public trust in governments. The abandoned city of Pripyat remains frozen in time, a silent reminder of how a few mistakes can unleash consequences that last for centuries. On January 28, 1986, millions of Americans watched live as the Space Shuttle Challenger lifted off a mission meant to inspire the nation. 73 seconds later, it exploded. That morning, temperatures at Cape Canaveral were near freezing. Despite engineers warning that the shuttle's O-ring seals might fail in the cold, the launch went ahead. At 11:38 a.m., Challenger rose into the sky. Almost immediately, a damaged O-ring allowed hot gas to leak from the right booster. A bright flame appeared, then the external fuel tank ruptured. In a split second, the shuttle broke apart in midair. The crew cabin, with all 7 astronauts, including teacher Krista McAuliffe, fell into the Atlantic. The nation was in shock. Investigators soon uncovered a chain of failures, ignored warnings, flawed decision-making, and pressure to maintain NASA's launch schedule. The disaster wasn't just mechanical, it was organizational. In the aftermath, NASA grounded its shuttle fleet for nearly 3 years. Major reforms were introduced: stricter engineering oversight, improved communication, and a complete redesign of the O-ring system. The Challenger crew is remembered as pioneers who pushed the boundaries of exploration, and whose loss forever changed how NASA approaches risk. On April 14, 1912, the RMS Titanic was sailing confidently through the North Atlantic, hailed as unsinkable, the greatest ship ever built. Late that night, warnings of icebergs flooded the radio room, but the Titanic kept moving at near full speed. At 11:40 p.m., outspotted an iceberg directly ahead. The ship turned, but it was too late. The iceberg ripped along the starboard side, puncturing 6 watertight compartments. Titanic was designed to survive for flooded sections. 6 sealed its fate. Water poured in. The ship's bow dipped lower with every passing minute. Passengers were told there was no danger, while lifeboats sat largely empty. There were lifeboats for only half the people on board. As panic spread, class divisions became deadly. First-class passengers reached the decks quickly. Many in third class were trapped below. At 2:20 a.m., just 2 hours and 40 minutes after impact, the Titanic broke apart and disappeared beneath the freezing Atlantic. Over 1,500 people died. Most never reached a lifeboat. Many froze to death in the icy water within minutes. The disaster shocked the world. It exposed deadly overconfidence, poor safety standards, and ignored warnings. Titanic changed maritime law: forever mandatory lifeboats, 24-hour radio watches, and international ice patrols. More than a century later, the wreck still lies on the ocean floor, a silent reminder that nature does not care about human ambition.